And before, I'm not going to give the introduction of Count Me In, but instead I have two of my wonderful partners who have been part of the Count Me In effort for the past 4 years, Allison Neswood and Dawn Howard, and they are going to lead tonight's session of giving us an overview of all 11 ballot measures. So thank you again. Looking forward to having you tonight. And Allison and Dawn, I will kick it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Caitlin. And thank you, everybody who joined the call today. I'm really excited to be a part of this, to be here with my good friend and colleague, Dawn Howard, who's amazing community organizer with the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition and does lots of other great things in our community. I'm Allison Neswood. My day job is as an attorney with the Colorado Center on Law and Policy, but both Dawn and I are here today with Count Me In. And so before I give a review of what Count Me In is, I just want to let everybody know that we are going to try to cover a lot of content today. As Caitlin said, we're going to try to cover all 11 statewide ballot measures that you're going to see. And so our summary is, we're going to kind of prioritize getting through everything, and for that reason, hold questions till the end. But if you do have questions as we go through, go ahead and enter those into the chat. We'll try to leave enough space at the end of the webinar for people to speak their questions into the space. But if we don't, we'll be talking about some deep dives on some of the more complex or involved measures as well. And so there will be other opportunities with Count Me In to really get questions in. And this is really just like the quick overview of all the different issues that you're going to see when you receive your ballot in the mail or when you go pick it up, however you choose to vote. Okay, so to get started, I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, Caitlin, give me a thumbs up if you see. Cool. Okay, so Count Me In is a collaborative effort among several different groups that share a set of values around how we can create a better Colorado together, a more equitable Colorado together. And the steering committee members for Count Me In are the Colorado Center on Law and Policy, Colorado Common Cause, the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition, the Colorado Fiscal Institute, Community Resource Center, Great Education Colorado, the Small Business Majority, Together We Count, and then we also have some real rock star volunteers in Sue Catterall and Adrian Christie. And as Caitlin mentioned, we came together a few years ago now to create Count Me In because we believe that here are some values on this slide. We really believe that everyday Coloradans play a key role in shaping Colorado's policies and public investments, and a key reason for that is because of how sort of involved our ballot initiative process is. We see a lot of issues on our ballots as Coloradans, and they really do play a really important role in what our communities look like and what sort of resources we have and how we use them. And then we also believe that, that this is not, it's a good thing because we have the opportunity to be informed and to become educated and really make the best decisions for our communities, given our experiences being in these communities and really seeing what we and our neighbors and our friends need in a shared society. And then the last point very much related to that is that, when our communities are, or when our friends and neighbors are informed, we really have the opportunity to create the thriving communities that we all want to be a part of. So Count Me In, we put Count Me In together to sort of support these beliefs and really see them to fruition. I think, one thing that is kind of a downer about election season, even though we're, really positive about getting people engaged in voting and in elections, it can still feel kind of like a downer. A lot of the messaging is negative. There's a lot of attacks out there in the, the messages that we hear on TV or otherwise in the media. And so one thing we wanted to do in Count Me In is put together a sort of positive message about voting. And that resulted in this video that I'm going to show you. And after we watch it, I'll come back.
Colorado. We choose to live here for a reason. As Coloradans, we have the freedom to make our own decisions, to live life the way we see fit, to feel the earth beneath our feet in the mountains, to smell the air on the plains, to hear a concert or taste fresh produce straight from the farm, to see the sun flicker through the leaves of an aspen grove. And like an aspen grove, we're connected. Our neighborhoods and communities are like the roots of the trees. Just like the aspens move nutrients through their roots, the life of our state moves through our diverse communities. We all want many of the same things: roads, schools, hospitals, parks, and a safe place to live and work. Our unique way of life in different communities depends on our ability to count on one another. We depend on one another to make good decisions on behalf of the whole state. One way that happens is through voting. We fought long and hard to make sure everyone can vote. In Colorado, we have the power to vote on those critical issues that affect our way of life. It's how we make sure the state thrives and everyone is treated fairly. As voters, it's our responsibility to be informed about the decisions we make and how they affect us and our communities. Our decisions matter in every election, not just the candidates we elect, but also the issues we decide to support. We take the time to educate ourselves in order to make the best decisions for our families, our communities, and our state. Because our decisions matter. Our votes matter. As Coloradans, we choose to live here. We choose this way of life. Our decisions can determine the future of the state. Let's choose wisely. To learn more, visit countmeincolorado.com.
So that's pretty uplifting, right? So I think, we put together this video and really to make a couple key points in addition to, sort of being an uplifting message about voting. But, one point being that we are really connected to each other, and we're connected to each other in such a way that, the well-being of all of us together really depends on the well-being of each of us individually, each of us in our families, each of us in our schools. We really do better when we're all doing better. And then the second point is that the way that we inform ourselves in order to vote or to influence the election process on these initiatives is really important to the well-being of to well-being all the way from the individual up to the whole. And so we just like to kind of start our presentations with that message as Count Me In. And so one thing we like to remind people as well, to get more specific, is that we've made really important policy decisions that impact our way of life through the ballot. As voters and as the people who worked on some of these issues, we're the first state to legalize marijuana through Amendment 64. We also raised the wages of our lowest earning workers in Colorado through Amendment 70. We changed the way we make changes to our Constitution, so sort of the initiative process. We decided to change the standard for that with Amendment 71 in 2016. With Amendments Y and Z in 2018, we changed the way we draw our voting districts or our districts, and so that impacts how what our representatives or what our representation looks like in Congress and in more local governments as well. And with Back in 1992 with GOCO, or Great Outdoors Colorado, we really demonstrated Colorado's ethic around having outdoor space that we all could use and enjoy, and created Great Outdoors Colorado. So all of these, measures we passed in the past through the ballot, and we'll have the opportunity to make some important choices again on the ballot in 2020. And so before I get into the specific measures, I'm actually going to turn it over to Dawn just to give some sort of background or a little civics lesson on what you see on the ballot each year.
So I just want to demystify the letters and the numbers of the ballot. So a citizen initiative amendment is a statute or a constitutional amendment that makes the ballot by us collecting enough registered voter signatures across the entire state in favor of putting it up for a statewide vote. They are the numbered measures and amendments on the ballot. A referred means a statute or constitutional amendment put on the ballot by the Colorado legislature. They are the lettered measures and amendments on the ballot. To get on the ballot, referred amendments must receive 2/3 majority support in both the state Senate and the state House. Referred measures that create new laws only require a simple majority in both chambers to be on the ballot. A referendum petition, a statute or constitutional amendment that is brought to the ballot by gathering signatures from registered voters in an attempt to have a bill that was passed by the legislature placed on the ballot as a statewide ballot measure.
Awesome.
Allison.
Awesome, thanks, Dawn. And so with that, we'll go ahead and jump into the different measures. And again, this is where we're gonna kind of just give a really high level overview of what each measure is about. And we'll let you know where you can kind of get more deep information on some of these as well. The first one we're gonna mention is Amendment B. And this amendment has to do with the Gallagher Amendment, or with a provision of the state constitution, which is called the Gallagher Amendment. Passed in 1982, the Gallagher Amendment, basically it sets a formula for property taxes in Colorado. So specifically, Gallagher requires what's referred to as the 45-55 split. We kind of indicated it by this little icon down here. And under the required split, 45% of property taxes must come from residential property, which is like housing or rental units, places where people live. And then 55%, the other 55% comes from non-residential property. So like business or agricultural property or oil and gas property. And additionally, under Gallagher, the rate or the percentage of property that's subject to tax is set at 29% for non-residential property. So on non-residential property, the assessment rate can't move. It's set at 29%. So that means that under this Gallagher formula, the only variable that can shift to maintain that 45-55 split is the residential assessment rate. And so what we've seen over time is that the residential assessment rate has to be adjusted. The legislature adjusts it, but they adjust it in order to maintain that 45-55 split. It's not adjusted based on the state budget or what we need to pay for as the state of Colorado. And so what Amendment B would do is repeal that amendment. It just strikes the language from the Constitution. And the effect of this will be to eliminate that 45-55 split requirement. The amendment will also freeze or put the assessment rates into statute. And the residential assessment rate will stay where it is right now at 7.15%. And the non-residential assessment rate will also stay where it is right now at 29%. By putting this in statute, the legislature will have the ability to reduce the assessment rates further. But because of other provisions in our Constitution under Tabor, they wouldn't be able to raise any of those rates. And finally, just because this only strikes constitutional language, it only needs a simple majority to pass. When we're sort of talking about the different measures on the ballot, this Amendment B and Gallagher are often where most of the questions come up because it is kind of complex and there's sort of some background understanding that's required to make it completely clear. So the Gallagher Amendment will be the subject of one of Count Me In's deep dives, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. So you'll definitely have some time to get your questions about this initiative answered. Then I'll hand it over to Dawn for the next one.
Amendment C would change the time a charitable organization must have continuously existed prior to obtaining a charitable gaming license from 5 years down to 3 years. And it allows individuals outside of the organization hosting the bingo or raffle to manage the games for the organization instead of for the organization in exchange for no more than the minimum wage. So back to Allison.
The next one is Amendment 76. This one basically changes, I think, 2 or 3 words in our Constitution. Right now, Section 1 of Article 7 of the Colorado Constitution says this language here: every citizen of the United States who has obtained the age of 18 years has resided in this state for such a time as may be prescribed by law, and has been duly registered as a voter, if required by law, shall be qualified to vote in all elections. And it would change that every citizen at the beginning to only a citizen. So it would say only a citizen of the United States who has attained the age, and then the same from there. Yep, so that's it. It's pretty simple. And I'll hand it back over to Dawn.
Thanks. Amendment 77. Amendment 77 would allow voters in Central City, Black Hawk, and Cripple Creek to approve new maximum bet limits on games and approve any new casino games. Currently, the maximum bet is $100. Amendment 77 would also expand the use of casino tax revenue for community colleges to include student retention and completion programs. Gambling at the Southern Ute and Ute Mountain Tribal casinos will not be affected by this measure, and it will not affect any other types of gambling. Out of the 23 states with legalized gambling, Colorado is one of 2 states to limit bets. And I'll pass it on to Allison.
So the next one is Proposition EE. This proposition, if passed, would increase the tax on tobacco products and create a new tax on some nicotine products, including vaping devices. Basically, the intention of this measure is to tax all tobacco and nicotine products that are out on the market. The measure has the taxes on individual cigarettes and other types of products increase over a multiple year period. And the funding or the revenue from those tax increases or new taxes would go towards a number of purposes. In an ongoing way, the funding would go towards a preschool program, tobacco prevention, and other tobacco education programs. And then also in the first 3 years after the measure, if it passes, if it does, there'll be some funding put into rural schools, specifically additional funding for K through 12 education, and some funding for, basically the intention is around housing stability. So to put some funding in the state's affordable housing fund, and to fund basic eviction defense, which is, basically attorneys for people who are facing eviction. Actually, before I go back to Dawn, I just wanted to mention on the voting one that I mentioned last time, or when I was going last, about the change to the voting language in the Constitution. We are going to have a voting measure focused deep dive next Monday, and so there'll be the opportunity to answer some questions about that one there. And then this Proposition EE will also be discussed in some more depth during the fiscal measures deep dive, which will be on Wednesday, and will also include Gallagher and 116, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Okay, sorry, Dawn.
Thank you. Proposition 113 would let us as Coloradoans decide if we should sign onto the national popular vote. It's a interstate compact. The compact would guarantee the presidency to the candidate who receives the most popular votes across all 50 states and the District of Columbia. This would not go into effect until there's enough states whose electoral number adds up to 270. So back to Allison.
Thanks, Don. And yeah, I'll just mention that on that Proposition 113 will be addressed in more depth during that same voting deep dive on next Monday, a week from today. The next one has to do with wolves. Proposition 114 would require Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission to create a plan that would reintroduce gray wolves back into Colorado west of the Continental Divide by the end of 2023 and implement that plan by the end of 2023. The commission would be required to compensate owners for losses of livestock that are caused by gray wolves as well under the proposition.
Proposition 115, Prop 115 would prohibit abortions after 22 weeks unless the abortion is needed to immediately save the life of the mother. Performing the abortion would be a Class 1 misdemeanor, which would be punishable by a fine ranging from $500 to $5,000 and the loss of a medical license for at least 3 years. It would not include jail time. Back to Allison.
Thank you. So Proposition 116, although it would likely have a lot of impact, is pretty simple. Right now, Colorado has a single rate income tax, meaning the same income tax rate is applied across the income spectrum, no matter how low or high your income is. And so what Proposition 116 would do is cut the single rate income tax, which right now is 4.63%, and it would reduce that to 4.55%. And as the name single rate income tax implies, the cut would include all income, would apply to all income tax brackets. And it would also include corporate income taxes in Colorado and would start in tax year 2020. And so that means that there would be some, reconciling of sort of the tax assessment on income, and is part of why the impact of this would be so big on our state budget. We put an additional slide here just for some additional information about 116. It would reduce state revenue by over 100 million in fiscal year 2021. And then here's some information about what the average taxpayer would receive. It would look like sort of a $37 savings on taxes for the whole year. And then it breaks out that savings by tax bracket as well. So if you have an annual income of 25,000, the savings or the reduced taxes would be $20 for the year. If you're at $50,000, the reduced taxes would be $40 for the year. And then if you make $250,000, your savings look more like $200 a year. And as a millionaire, you'd save $800 from Proposition 116 as a result of 116. I'm also going to talk about Proposition 117. This it sounds really strange, and it kind of is, but it would require voter approval for the creation of what's called a enterprise, or a fee-based enterprise, if the expected revenue from the fees of the enterprise will exceed $100 million over 5 years. And so an enterprise is defined in the Constitution as a state-owned business. And at base, really what these enterprises do is charge fees or collect payments in order to provide some kind of service. So the Colorado Lottery is an enterprise. It takes the payments for the gaming, for the game, and then provides the chance to win, I guess. And there are a range of these enterprises, and it's basically so that the government can collect fees from the beneficiaries of some of their services in order to provide those goods or services. What Proposition would do is require voter approval if it's a big enterprise. If the fees collected by this government-owned business would exceed 100 million over 5 years, then everybody in the state of Colorado would have to vote on it and approve it before it could take effect.
Proposition 118 establishes 12-week paid family and medical leave for eligible employees. This paid leave would be a 50-50 split between the employer and employee contribution to a state insurance program, which will be run by the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. It would cover health emergencies like a new child. Qualified leave includes a new child, serious illness, caring for your sick family member, a safe leave in the case of abuse, and it's to a family member called to active duty. Employers with less than 10 employees will be exempt from offering paid leave. The program And we will have a deeper dive on this on Thursday, October 8th. Back to Allison.
So we did it. Yay, we got through all 11. And I think we actually will have some time for more questions on the specific ballot measures or on CMI. But just to kind of, close things out, wanted to go back to the main theme of our presentation and of CMI, count me in, effort. And it's really about like, how do we, as whether we're voters or whether we're people trying to influence elections, how do we use these election processes to make our communities stronger? And so the first way is to learn about these measures, to attend presentations like this, or read the ballot guides or the Blue Book, and think about the ways that these measures will affect our communities. Will they affect our state budgets and thus the services that we use our state budget for, like education and public safety and all of those things. So really thinking about what is it in our communities that really helps us all do well, and understanding how you think those ballot measures will affect that. And then we have, thankfully, a lot of sources to support that kind of research and becoming informed. The Secretary of State has all the information on each measure, including the ballot text, the registered proponents and opponents, the people who are supporting or trying to defeat each measure, key dates, and then also how to register to vote and make sure that your registration is up to date and that you have the right address and everything, so you're good to go. The Colorado Legislative Council produces the Blue Book, which really goes into detail and provides a nonpartisan evaluation of each ballot measure. And that includes comments from both proponents and opponents, in addition to just its sort of nonpartisan evaluation. Just Vote Colorado is also a nonpartisan resource all about voting. It includes FAQs on who's eligible to vote and how they can do so. It also helps you find your polling place, a drop box for your mail-in ballot if you fill that out at home and want to go drop it off. It also has a hotline regarding voting in both English and Spanish. Finally, of course, there's Count Me In, and we want to be here to help you connect to resources. We also have information on each ballot measure, in addition to these webinars, in print. Caitlin, I think I saw, posted a link to our ballot guide, which is just this really beautiful presentation of each measure, and it has sort of non-biased information about what each measure does, kind of like we presented today. And then it's also, we have our Count Me In website, which is really just intended to be a place where all of this these good voting resources can live and be linked to. And so there'll be a lot of information there. And then, there's more than just our statewide ballot issues. Each locality will have their own local measures to consider. In Denver, for example, we're going to be considering sales tax and homeless services issue. That is really important for our communities and important to be considering when we're thinking about how to make the best choices for each other and ourselves. And finally, we want to just remind everybody that that it's not just about voting and who gets to vote. Even if we're ineligible for voting because of our citizenship status or immigration status, we still live in these communities and we still contribute to these communities and can still learn about these measures and talk to our friends and neighbors about how they'll impact our communities. And so we really want to have an empowering message there, even though our voting rules are still problematic or still can be problematic, that we still have the opportunity to express our views and to take some power there and influence the way that people in our community vote on these measures and on the people who represent us. And so, you know, you could get involved with a campaign that you care about. As you know, we went through all of these measures. Most of them have a proponent and an opponent that is working on, you know, either defeating or passing the measure. And so they will always have ways for volunteers to get involved. One of the measures we passed last year, I think, created, or I don't know, maybe it wasn't last year, recently, created the Colorado Independent Redistricting Commission. And that was really about taking the partisanship out of drawing our representation districts. And so there's an opportunity to be involved there to set what those lines look like. And then there's just an opportunity to tell your friends about Count Me In or these other resources, but Count Me In is happy to do presentations like this for your own group. I'm signed up to do a ballot brunch with a group, and I think next Saturday morning or maybe the one after that, and that sounds really fun. And so we'll show up virtually, given the circumstances this year, but we'll show up and have a conversation with your group about these measures and get people as excited as possible about, you know, participating in this election cycle. And then, you know, we've mentioned throughout that this is a series and we're going to have some deeper dives. Here are the dates for those. Obviously, October 5th today is our big overview of all of the measures. Then on October 7th, on Wednesday, we're going to be talking about fiscal measures, including Amendment B, the Gallagher Amendment, I believe Proposition EE, the tobacco nicotine tax, and then Proposition 116, which is the flat income tax reduction. And then on October 8th, that's Thursday, is going to be the deep dive on family, or the Family Medical Leave Act. And then on October 12th, next Monday, we'll be doing the deep dive on the voting related initiatives. So the change to, you know, every citizen to only citizens, and other ones related to voting, the national popular vote, etc. So that's it, and I'm glad to say that we did leave about 17 minutes for questions, so we can have a conversation here. Caitlin, our fearless leader, may jump in and sort of help us navigate any of the questions. And so why don't we start with any that were in the chat, and I think Caitlin's been watching that. And were there any?
There weren't, but I think at this point, if you have questions, you can either chat them in or feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. And then I also encourage you, I know, this overview is brief, as Allison said, join us for our deep dives. Those deep dives will also be recorded and put on our website as a resource as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question on paid family leave program or the initiative. I've heard it explained that for small businesses with less than 10 employees, that they're exempt from the program, which is what we heard tonight. And I've also heard that they're exempt from the payment. So is it that small business owners are exempt from making the payment into paid family leave, or are they exempt from allowing their employees to take family leave?
Do you want me to answer, Caitlin?
Either
Yeah,
or.
So it's, I think, the latter, but basically what's exempt is the small business employer from paying into the system. But under this paid family initiative, all workers, including workers that are employed at a small business firm or at a small business, will be eligible to access paid family leave under the initiative. So even though, the small business employer doesn't have to pay on the worker's behalf, the worker is still eligible under the initiative.
Thank you so much. That's a really important clarification, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Other questions?
I put a question into the chat that I'm just wondering if the, will the deep dives go into pros and cons on each issue?
I think the way that we are saying that, because Count Me In is objective, we will mention some of what the proponents are saying and what the opponents are saying. And, you know, talk about, or at least provide information about who is supporting and who is opposing those measures. But because we are not the campaign, we probably won't go big into the pros and cons of each.
Thank you.
Of course. Oh, and then I saw a question chatted, and I'll just say it out loud. Who are the proponents and opponents of the gambling measure? And as Esther chatted, Local Choice Colorado is a proponent of the gambling measure of, what is it, Amendment 77. And there are no registered opponents at this point. Quiet group. It's a lot of information to take in, I know. But I really encourage you all to look at our Count Me In ballot guide and FAQ that is up on the website that I shared, that will be actually translated into Spanish as well as another resource. And really encourage you to begin these conversations. And Count Me In is here and available to help answer any questions that you might have within putting together this information. I think we've all become somewhat of experts on these ballot measures. Or if we can't answer the question, we probably know where to direct you to. The Count Me In website, we want it to be a resource for you. We have listed all the proponents and opponents that have registered through the Secretary of State's website for you to also look at and use as a resource. And, you know, we are available to bring this presentation, go a little bit deeper into it, depending on time limit, or, you know, really just talk about specific measures that you're interested in to your organization, your group, your friends, your neighbors. You know, we are available. It's a great steering committee of, you know, I think there's 13 organizations and some awesome volunteers who understand the importance of knowing what's on your ballot. Because let's face it, our ballots have become long, and reading ballot measures is confusing. And so really breaking down what each ballot measure says is very important as we, you know, vote on policies that will forever change our communities. So with that, if there's no other questions, I think we can be done and give you guys 10 minutes back to your evening. And this was wonderful. I'll send you all an email with more information and links so it's easy for you to click. And it's so great seeing so many familiar names and faces. And thank you, Dawn and Allison, for that great presentation. And Count Me In is here. I encourage you, everyone, to go to countmeincolorado.com.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So many great people. Cool. All right, I think I'm just gonna end this meeting, or is there something special I need to do? All right, thank you.
Thank you.